Hey, how you doing, everybody? Welcome back. This is Chilling with the Pastor. Right now we're on Call Is Off, and right now we're chilling with Pastor Leticia Preacely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sitting down with me and talking with me and rapping with me today.
Absolutely. I was excited to get the invitation.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good stuff. I've seen you moving within the conference and stuff and the things you're doing, and it was like, okay, yeah, I would love to definitely be able to sit down and have a conversation with you.
I apprate that.
Get a chance to see you when you kind of let your hair down a little bit, take the ponytail out.
Literally.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, literally. But we're going to jump right in with the first question here. And this is a question I ask everybody. I think it's very important that everybody knows this. When did you first come to a place of realizing that Jesus was real for you?
That's a good question. That's an important question. Yes. Okay, let me think. So I was definitely an adolescent. I think that's the right stage of life.
Okay.
Because I was not quite a teenager. And I went to church with my granny and would fall asleep in church because she went to the 8 a.m. service. And that was just too early for like a 6-year-old.
Right.
But had always been exposed to church and a Christian family. But it was not until I was in about the 5th grade in elementary that a Jehovah's Witness came to our house.
Interesting.
It was interesting because Phyllis was deaf, which is important for me in my household because I am a CODA, which is a child of deaf adults.
Okay.
And to have someone come to the house, even though, you know, we would hide from the Jehovah's Witnesses and pretend like we weren't home.
Yeah, that was common. I mean, it was almost a must, right?
When Phyllis came, it was neat to see that she was deaf and that she could sign.
Wow.
And that immediately brought in thoughts of my mom being able to expand her community.
Yeah.
So my mom agreed to study with her. And I would always have somewhere to go or something to do when they were studying. Go outside and play. Hey, Phyllis. Bye, Phyllis.
Right.
See you later, Mommy.
So we do when we're kids, right?
Right. And she would always invite me to study. Then finally, she got me to sit down with her. She said, just before you go running, just give me 30 minutes next week or whenever it was. And I said, okay, because she was so nice. And she was consistent. So I started studying with Phyllis and realized I absolutely loved the Bible. I loved the stories and I liked her. And I appreciated how plain she made the word.
Right.
So she is the reason why I developed a tremendous love to study God's word and to pray. So I became drawn to Jeremiah as a 10-year-old because he was the weeping prophet. That fool could pray. You hear me? Oh, I'm supposed to say fool. Am I supposed to call Jeremiah? Okay, that soul could pray.
We wouldn't mean it in a bad way. That was that good food.
Right. So I absolutely loved his heart for intercession and his heart for the people and gravitated towards him. And we had a rough childhood. And my mom and dad had broken up. They were never married when I was in the 5th grade. So that was right after we became a single parent household. And I have 2 younger brothers who are 6 and 7 years younger than me. And so it was refreshing to study with Phyllis and for her to make faith practical for me. So we studied Jeremiah, a bunch of scriptures. We studied Jesus. He is my favorite, of course. But him in the Garden of Gethsemane, it fascinated me that he had the courage to pray. I want you to take this cup away from me, but not my will, your will be done.
Right.
And at that point, I realized it wasn't always about me and what I want, but it was about God's will. And so that's the way I began to pray. I had like really specific prayers. Lord, help my mom become, sober. Help her to kick this because she was addicted to crack at the time. This drug addiction, help her to get a good job so we can have a nice home and, the American dream, happy ever after. But then I would say, but not my will, your will be done. And I meant it at like 10 or 11.
That's what I was going to ask you too. How old was that again?
Yeah, I was like 10 or 11.
11. That's very mature though.
So had to grow up a little fast because of our circumstances, but always grew up in a loving household. Knew my mama loved me. Knew my grandmama loved me. We lived in a 3-family house. So Granny Gran was on the first floor. We lived on the second floor. And then my uncle was on the third floor. And before we lived on the second floor, we actually, before I had my 2 younger brothers, lived on the third floor. And my aunt and my cousin lived on the second floor. So it was always a family house.
Right.
Thank God for grandparents who brought stability to the household.
Most certainly.
So in that experience and growing spiritually and in my faith with Phyllis, when I was in the 8th grade, we were going through all kinds of stuff and I prayed, this is how I wanted to work out, but not my will, your will be done. Right. And my grandmother, who lived in New York, my father's mother, she kept threatening to come and pick me up and take me back to New York because the 6th through the 7th grade, I hadn't been going to school regularly because I would stay home, try to watch my mom, try to take care of my brothers. Always did well when I went, but I wasn't consistent. I got like letters with threats for truancy. It was not a good situation. So she said, I'm going to come and get you. And I said, I am not coming to New York. So you're going to come and it's going to be a waste of time. I had a smart mouth.
Right. You do the head movement too?
So I did. I was on the phone like, I'm not coming to New York.
Right.
I was a work in progress, but respectful for the most part. But with Grandma Lillian, I was just like, I don't know who she thinks she is. Gonna come pluck me up out my home. Got to be here for my mama and them. So I told her no 6th grade, no 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, she said, she just came. It was right after Christmas and she just showed up in Cleveland. And I was like, I don't know why she here because ain't nobody going back to New York with her. And
then what happened?
Then she said, come here, sit down and have a conversation with me. Let's talk. So I sat down at my Granny Grand's dining room table, hair all in my mouth, at my Granny Grand's dining room table. And she said, T, because that's what, certain family members call me. T, I want you to know that it really hurts my heart to see you in the situation you're in. And so I got down on my knees and I asked God how I could help you and what I should do in this situation. And I heard him clearly say to come and get you. Why the Holy Spirit got to be real. Right. So at that point, my heart just completely melted and I started weeping because God said, you need to go to New York. And I'm so glad he didn't tell me before then because I wasn't ready to hear it then, let alone before. So I knew I needed to go to New York, but we have a big family tradition on my mom's side. We have a big New Year's dinner that my Granny Gran started when I was a baby. So it was at that point, almost 13 years old or so. And I said, I said, Grandma, I said, I'm going to come to New York because the Spirit is telling me I need to go, but I have to come after New Year. I need to be here for our New Year dinner. And she said, okay. And then afterwards, and then we hugged and cried and it was all precious. And so after I probably went outside to go play because we loved playing.
It was a nice escape.
Oh, yeah. And it was winter, so we probably had snow and all kinds of stuff. But I didn't know this at the time. But my grandmother, my Granny Gran told Grandma Lillian, she said, I don't know why you let that child come after New Year. She ain't coming back to New York. She going to make a fool out of you. And Grandma Lillian said, trust her. I believe she's going to come. And we had our family dinner. It's usually about 50 plus people come over to Granny Gran's house. They all descend upon the house, have good food, good fellowship. We have a good time, good memories. And then on January 2nd, I left. I got on the Greyhound. Okay. Because we had money like that to be hopping on planes and stuff. I got on the Greyhound from Cleveland to New York City. Wow. And lived in New York City for what was supposed to be temporary. I was just going to the end of the year. Okay. And I came back home that summer. And my mother almost overdosed. And I had to call the ambulance on her. And I knew that I wasn't supposed to come home. So I said, I'm going to stay for one more year. So that was ninth grade at that point. I'm just going to stay for my freshman year and I'm coming back. But once I got to high school, I started flourishing and in school and in church. I had gotten saved. I became Baptist.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Once I moved to New York. My grandma went to St. Albans Baptist Church.
Okay.
And I went to St. Albans with my grandma, and got saved that spring after I moved there.
That's awesome.
And I feel like I was in Sunday school in new members classes for months. Like, it was a long time.
It was a long training.
It was several months. And grandma was like, how long have you been taking classes? She's like, you should be getting baptized by now.
Well, or at least teaching the
class. And so she had a conversation with Pastor Harding. She said, Pastor, my granddaughter has been in these classes at least 3 or 4 months. I mean, it got to be time for her to get baptized right about now. And he said, oh, yes. And, so I ended up getting baptized, I think, like late summer, early fall. But when I started high school and I began to grow spiritually and in my church, leadership found me. I have no problem being in the background. It's comfortable.
Right.
You hear me?
It is.
I love supporting.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I became the youth choir vice president, and then the youth choir president, and then the youth department president, and then the co-leader of the step team, and then helping, it was just like leadership on the liturgical dance team. And I was like the youngest member of the missionary outreach team.
Right. Okay.
I loved hanging out with the seniors, though, the seasoned saints. I loved hanging out with them. So I just kept on growing and flourishing in the church and in leadership. And then at school, I was just flourishing, in the Scholars Institute, and got installed into the National Honor Society, and the math team, and student government, and junior class president, and student government, so it just got to the point where I was like, okay, God, I guess I'm supposed to stay and graduate here, even though I miss my family like crazy. I did go home during summers and during Christmas break, but it was hard. So God became real to me when I was about 10 and has stayed with me the whole time. And I can tell you more stories about prayers. For instance, I have to share this story. Yeah. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had gotten tired of hearing the reports from my grand that my mom had stole some more money from her, or, something was just not going well at home. Right. So one Friday evening, with a heavy heart, I just prayed and I said, God, the next time I hear from home, I want it to be good news. I don't know what, I want it to be something good. And that Saturday when I talked to my grand, she said, T, your mother went to rehab.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she had been to rehab before,
right,
but I had a peace that I hadn't had before. Right. And that was the time that she actually sobered up and remained sober.
Yeah.
And so it's the simple things.
The power of prayer, right?
The power of prayer.
Yeah.
And just faithfulness and trusting God.
Certainly.
And staying in New York, I ended up getting like a full ride to undergrad and was in the first class of New York Times scholars in their scholarship program. And God just paved the way for me to continue to grow and flourish, and just kind of led me. He ordered my steps, if you will.
Right.
So Jesus became real at a young age for me, which is great.
Right.
But then a part of me kind of wanted to have the bad girl experiences. If I'm just going to be real, I'm just like, can I live a little, Jesus? For real.
That's one of those sayings that a lot of older folk would actually have too. That telling us when we were younger, hey, you're young, live your life.
Right.
Go experience, blah, 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 blah. Right. But that's probably one of the biggest pet peeves that I hear today, being more experienced, right?
Right.
Like, okay, I actually wish I had more of a story like yours at this point. I didn't. I was in the church. I grew up in the church. I did some good things, but I hit a point where it's like, yeah, I'm a rebel. I'm going to do what I want to do, the way I want to do it. I was told I got plenty of time anyway.
Right.
So why go,
Yeah.
So, it's awesome though, because even to hear you talk about at the age of 10, praying the way that you talked about praying, prayed. I learned about prayer at a young age as well, but not at that level of maturity. That's pretty awesome, though. I like that.
Phyllis was great because she was just like, I know we have this model prayer because we did the Lord's Prayer. She said, but God just wants us to connect with him like we would a friend or somebody we really care about, because that's how he feels about us. And I was like, for real? That was helpful because, I thought it had to be all formal in prayer. But then when she broke it down, I was like, I can do that. Okay. And then she was just like, God can handle our pain. So it's okay to just, let it all hang out, so to speak. And so me and God had some throwdown moments. I mean, snot and tears and laying out and straight up tantrums sometimes.
Right.
But, I had been taught that he could handle that and he wanted that from us. And so it helped me. It blessed me. It still does. Right. Every now and then I have to, my Ben, who is 9, he said, Mommy, I need you to put your prayer blanket down again because I didn't tell you this, but I used to pray on your prayer blanket when you weren't home or when you weren't, in your room.
That's cool, though.
And I was like, oh, and light my prayer candles, because that's when you really going in, right? You have to change the atmosphere and you have to have some kind of, symbols in your space that, okay, God, it's me and you. I know this is my bedroom, but when I put the blanket down and light the candles, it's me and you time. Yeah, right. So, that's cool. That's been great for me.
Right. No, I mean, anything that helps you to draw closer to him, I think is absolutely magnificent. Not everybody is going to connect with the Father in the same way.
Right.
I just like what you were saying with your son. You have more than one son. I mean, you don't connect with each son exactly the same way. Right. Same way with our Father in heaven, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. All right, so it kind of brings us to a point of another question here. The second question. This is a question that I've actually been waiting for someone to answer.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. How do you differentiate between loving people and extending grace to them? Is it two different things to you? Is it the same thing? How do you go about that?
I would say that they are interconnected, but they are different. There are some nuances. I'm trying to think if what I'm about to say is honest.
Be honest.
No, I'm going to be honest. I'm just trying. I'm like, okay, is this a true statement? So I feel like I love everybody.
You feel like you do.
I feel like I do. But just in case there's like one or two who are the thorn in the side, I will, put a disclaimer on there and say, I feel like I love mostly everybody. Because there are those who are just like, oh, God. Oh, when you made them, you broke the mold. Jesus, take the wheel.
You broke the mold.
Who broke it all the way open? They take brokenness to a whole nother level.
Hey.
But yeah, so we are called to love everybody, right? That's who we are. That's who we should be. But when it comes to extending grace, I have learned that people do fall into different categories in our lives. So we have family. That's the folk we don't choose. We have friends who are the family we choose. We have associates. We have acquaintances. And those are just folks we are cool with. We like being around. Typically, we just don't see them as often. We don't, interact with them as often. Then you have assignments. And I have had to learn when people have been placed in my life as an assignment. And that's a really important distinction to make. When a person is placed in your life for a season, usually, for you to love on and extend grace to, but to realize that they're not there to pour back into you. They're just there for you to pour into and to be a blessing to and to help come through a particular season of their life. And then, you move on. You both go your different ways, and hopefully you've helped to make their lives better. So we're all called to love, but when it comes to extending grace, there's folks who are placed in our life as an assignment. And I think we get hurt or we deal with undue stress when we try to make assignments our friends, or we have misplaced expectations for people who are there to just be an assignment.
Right.
So being able to make that distinction is I have found to be helpful.
Okay. It's actually pretty cool that you actually had come to that place of understanding when to make that distinction.
Yeah, I had to, because I love hard, and when I'm in your corner, I'm all in.
Right.
And I was going through a season where I was so drained. Like, there were just certain people who would drain, just drain everything out of me. I would be exhausted dealing with them. I mean, they would call, or I would see them and I would want to run away, ignore, and I'm just like, okay, this shouldn't be this way. And so I had to pray and ask God to give me discernment about what was going on. Right. And he helped me to make that distinction. And I was just like, oh, and that helped me. Right. Because then I was able to establish healthier boundaries. So, no, you can't keep me on the phone for 2 hours. I've got about 20 minutes to talk to you. Right. And you'd be amazed how all of a sudden they're able to, work through whatever they're dealing with in 20 minutes when you help to set certain boundaries. Yeah. So when we are able to make that distinction, it helps us, Lord Jesus.
and that's actually a beautiful thing to kind of point out right now. We had the boundaries training yesterday, and I remember you saying about how when you all would do a ministry, you would let the people know up front what the time frame was. We're going to only be here probably about 20 minutes or so, but we wanted to come in and to pour into you, basically. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? And that's a beautiful thing, because I know definitely as African Americans sometimes we can, kind of take our time with things, and we don't want to let things go, and we have to pour out every single corner and avenue and every bit and drop of everything we got into someone else. We have to release. Yeah. And that might be it might be a little off topic, but it might be probably more because we don't believe in this whole thing called counseling. The psychoanalytics of things. Right. That was somebody else, though.
Yes, that was a video yesterday.
My goodness. But that's probably a lot of those things that happens with us. We don't allow ourselves to actually engage in life the same way that others do. Right. Try to be tough. About it. You know what? We can get through anything because our ancestors got through a lot of stuff. Right. But mentally, emotionally, and more especially spiritually, it may not have been the most healthy way to go about it as well. So coming to a place of really understanding who you are, I think helps in making those distinctions.
Self-awareness is huge. Yeah. It helps a lot in boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, they talked about a lot of stuff that really hit.
It did. Yesterday. I was trying to figure out what they were going to do for 7 hours.
Right. Because I thought we was going to get into the packet, but...
Well, when I looked through it, I was like, oh, okay, this is just for us to take back to our churches. So what are we doing for 7 hours?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they had a lot of good information, a lot of good things.
It was good.
Good to remind you of, or to teach you about if you hadn't even thought about it. So it turned out pretty good.
And the whole theme of being the beloved of God was great.
Yeah, most certainly. It was a lot of the stuff we learned as United Methodists about John Wesley's means of grace and what he thought, and a lot of that stuff is drawn out in different ways for me now. More and more, the more I learn about John Wesley, I realized
he was cool people. I mean,
he was long-winded, and his sermons were. I was reading one sermon. I thought I was reading a commentary for a moment there.
Man, you talking about, they think Baptists long-winded.
Right.
John
Methodism. Hold on, I'm going to talk to somebody. Methodism started out as something very long
Yes.
sermon-wise with John Wesley.
So it's a wonder that our churches actually have about 25-minute on average sermons today. Because that was not the spirit of our founding father.
He was long-winded, and he would hit on some stuff that was just so profound.
Absolutely.
Though. But
he was a man of God. He was a man of God.
He definitely was. He definitely was. In a time when there was no social media,
right?
Telephones, and had nothing but your mind and the word and people to deal with.
Yes, no 24-hour on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You went home and you actually were at home.
Exactly.
You're in your safe space.
Exactly.
You know, as opposed to being...
No televisions, no emails.
Right.
Not all of that stuff that distracts us today. No computers.
Yeah. You had to entertain yourself one way or another, and it most of the time came to you and God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was... don't get me started.
Right.